The Isle of Man's given me the best stepping stone to my career, so you can only thank the Isle of Man for that, really.
Welcome to Island Influencers, where we share stories of successful business owners, experienced professionals, entrepreneurs, and community leaders based or with influence in the Isle of Man. This podcast is brought to you by Thornton Chartered Financial Planners, because great financial planning has the power to change your life. Now here's your host, Sharon Sutton.
Welcome to this week's episode of Island Influencers. I'm excited to introduce you to Sacha Horsthuis, a dynamic marketeer and a keen sportswoman. Although Sacha was Manx born, she spent most of her childhood and adolescence in beautiful North Yorkshire in the UK and lived briefly in Saudi Arabia. Sacha returned to the Isle of Man 9 years ago. Sacha and her husband Mark co-own Cycle 360, the island's first combined cafe bike shop and unique events space, attracting roughly 500 customers every day through its standout timeless brickwork, convenience and warm thought-out interior. Cycle 360 is undoubtedly the busiest and most vibrant daytime venue on the Isle of Man. It's been a staple to so many since its doors opened in 2018, present company included. Sacha's role in particular was to create a brand, which would in turn attract global bike brands to the brand new bike shop, and importantly, to attract talented people to work for the company. In episode 90, Sacha shares her journey as a working mum and a marketing fanatic who's driven, ambitious, and a self-proclaimed perfectionist. She talks about her mission to constantly absorb knowledge, step outside her comfort zone, and innovate to continue to grow professionally. Finally, when I interviewed Sacha, she was still 29. So join me in wishing her a very happy 30th birthday as we dive into this week's conversation with Sacha Horsthuis, whose abundant positivity shines through in everything she does. First of all, welcome, Sacha. Thank you so much for agreeing to come on the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
It's a real thrill, as I've watched the growth of Cycle 360 over the past very short years, really, but it's already a phenomenon. My favorite place to go for a coffee and brunch with my family. So thank you for setting it up. I understand it's your part. I know you're part of the team, but I've been reading about you this morning and just what influence you've had on it. So yeah, thanks.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me. Very honoured to be on your very famous podcast.
Well, it's getting there. It's getting there. But you and I met at a very unusual place, didn't we? Yeah, it was. They say that, don't they? You can't go anywhere in the world, and you meet somebody from the Isle of Man because your husband was waiting in the start line for the Breck Epic mountain bike race.
Yes.
And
I heard a little voice saying, "Are you Sacha?" That was mad. I think you were following Mark on Strava.
Yeah.
You saw that he was in Breckenridge. Yeah, which to a lot of people don't even know where Breckenridge is, but it's in the Rocky Mountains, isn't it? Very far away from here.
Yeah, and an entirely different time zone with a small baby. That must have been a challenge.
Very challenging. Yeah, it was a. I was meant to do that race, but we quickly realised that it was going to be a bit more challenging, with me also being shattered and Mark. So yeah, we brought my dad along actually to that trip, but even still for him, it would have been too difficult. So yeah.
Excellent. Well, what we normally would do, if it's all right with you, if you could just tell me all about yourself, where you've come from and how you ended up coming to the Isle of Man and where you've got to. Well, obviously I've told everybody where you are now, but your story basically. Would you mind just sharing that for the benefit of our listeners?
Yeah, sure. So I'm not quite 30 yet. Very important. So I turned 30 in April. I have lived on the Isle of Man for 9 years now. But I was born a Manx. So I was raised in the UK.
Right. Okay. So your parents are Manx then?
Parents are Manx.
Yeah.
Although mum is actually from Lancashire, but she moved over here when she was really small. So she kind of classed herself as Manx.
Definitely.
My dad is a Quine. So my maiden name is Quine, which is a very Manx name.
Sure is.
So I left the island when I was 3. My mum met my stepdad, who's in the RAF. So we travelled around a lot in the UK, but majority of my childhood was spent in growing up in North Yorkshire. But we also lived overseas for a short while in Saudi Arabia.
Gosh.
For a few years, yeah. My memories of that are great, to be fair. I think if I was older, I would see it very differently. But as a young girl, I absolutely loved it. We were in a compound with a pool, had loads of friends, school was great. There's lots of, I look back and there was lots of weird things that went on that not a normal child would have gone through, like checking the bus for bombs in the morning, which I told at the time it was checking for spiders, which is what I got told.
Nice.
It was a great time there. And then left Saudi Arabia, and the most significant part of my upbringing really is that I went to boarding school from age 9, so full-time boarder, which again, I absolutely loved. And I did that up until, 18, up until I went to uni. So at sixth form,
Where did you go for school? Right,
so
you boarded?
Yes, I went to a school called Queen Ethelburgers, which is in North Yorkshire.
Right.
Just outside of York, near Borough Bridge. And it's renowned for students taking their horses there, which is quite funny because I'm terrified of horses, which is interesting. But it's predominantly for boarders, so 90% of the school were boarders, which was a really nice kind of atmosphere because it meant all the kids there, you just grew like the best bonds. You're all boarders. There was only a small percentage of day pupils. And then for sixth form, I changed school, went to Bootham in the centre of York, and became a day pupil because Mum moved back. She moved to York so that I could stay with her.
Oh, that's nice. And I know you're very sporty. So what sort of sports did you get into, and how did you get into cycling?
Yeah, so it's funny, when I was younger, the cycling was never really an opportunity, especially for a girl. It was never ever talked about. I can't remember ever being around, especially as a boarder. It was your kind of team sports like your netball and your hockey and athletics. So I was in everything really. Athletics, I was 100-meter sprinter. So I've always been kind of your fartlek training, your fast sprints, your I always say, like, if I was exposed to cycling earlier, I'd probably really like the track. It's definitely more towards my physique. So netball, I played, first team netball and hockey, and athletics. I did a bit of swimming as well, and then I moved into that for sixth form. So when I looked at my sixth form for A level, like, sport was quite important to me. So it's been more of a team sport. So cycling, to be fair, has always been a part of my family because my dad has always been really heavily involved with cycling. So it's never been competitive for me. It's always been on family trips. All holidays with my dad and my brother would all evolve around camping and cycling.
Excellent.
I'd come to the Isle of Man, obviously, because my dad still lived here. I'd come to the Isle of Man really, often throughout the year, and we'd always be on trips, cycle trips. First time I got a road bike was when I first moved to the Isle of Man, and as a lot of people are, because it's so nimble, isn't it? And the wheels are so thin. You're a bit like, I've been used to mountain bikes.
Yes.
So that was a bit nerve-wracking the first time I went on a road bike, but you quickly learn. After you
don't be scared.
Got to fall over, haven't you, to learn?
Yes, unfortunately. Yes. So where did you go to university?
So uni, so went from York to Newcastle. So it was quite a lot of people actually ended up going from York to Newcastle. I think it's just a northern community. So I went to Northumbria University, which I have to say were the best 3 years of my whole life. It just had the best time, the best of friends.
Yes.
It was just an awesome experience. I think because I'd been to boarding school as well, I was already pretty independent. I didn't ever get sick. I was used to, changing my bed and things like that, and cooking and stuff like that. So it was awesome. So I loved it there. And then my mum she moved back to the Isle of Man when I was at uni on like an agency role.
Right.
To cover mat leave as a social worker.
Right.
Just a bit of change really for her. So and then she ended up obviously rekindling lots of friendships from when she was younger, and ended up staying here, much to my disappointment at the time. I did not see myself living on the Isle of Man. And after
so many people say that. It's funny, isn't it?
So funny. I remember being on the boat And after my graduation it was quite funny anyway, because I had my mum and stepdad and my dad all there, and we obviously never rarely together.
Yes.
Anyway, so that was quite funny. And I cried the whole boat journey back. I don't want to be on the Isle of Man. But I thought, you know what, it's a really good opportunity to get my foot in the door. I'll live here a year and then I'll see kind of what avenues open. But it was difficult.
That's old ruse. Well done.
It was difficult to get a job in the UK without a postcode. I found interesting at the time. I think it's a bit different now. But I did apply for quite a few jobs in Manchester and kind of Media City, because I'd done an advertising degree.
Yeah.
So Media City kind of really appealed to me, and the financial services didn't. But yeah, to be fair, the Isle of Man's gave me the best stepping stone to my career. So you can only thank the Isle of Man for that, really.
Yeah. Great. So you went and worked for a few companies. I see Appleby mentioned there, and plan.com.
Yeah.
What was that like?
Yeah, so Appleby was really my first entry-level junior marketing role. I had an absolutely incredible mentor. I call her a mentor rather than a line manager, because she was just amazing, and I feel very grateful for having her, really. So my role actually at Appleby wasn't Isle of Man focused, it was a global role. So I worked across all of the offices. Yeah. Global marketing communication.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was basically to grow their digital presence. So internally for their employer brand, but also kind of for exposure across the website. And it was a particular focus on digital channels, and it didn't really involve any business development, which I loved, because it just meant I got to be creative. And they were a really great company to start off with, just because they were really ambitious. And so I started there, and then they had a management buyout. I moved over after a few years of working at Appleby. I just was ready for a bit of a change, really. So essentially got poached by once that management buyout had happened.
Yes.
Which I think is funny, isn't it? Because you end up trying to jump. Sometimes I think you end up trying to jump to increase your salary and to move up the ladder. Which on reflection, I probably should have just had a chat with my director of marketing at the time and just said, can I have more money, please? But it's the confidence, isn't it? Especially
that's a woman thing.
Yeah, it is. Females are renowned. So I didn't have that conversation, really. I just thought, you know what, I'm ready for the next change. And then what essentially happened was I met Mark, and he had this idea of the bike cafe. And later on, he kind of added the fitness in. But because we'd spoken about potentially me becoming the marketer for it, I panicked and went, oh my gosh, I need more experience in different sectors to be able to give my best self. So it was a case of, when I started at another professional services company, Plan actually reached out to me when they needed to recruit for a marketing person. And I just basically jumped at the opportunity, because they were just a company that were renowned for being very different on the Isle of Man. And tech is something that I really was quite keen to explore. They were these kind of game changers, and they were a startup. So that was really cool to me as well. So yeah, I didn't do long there, and that wasn't on purpose either. It's mainly because Cyber 60 started to really take off, and I never envisaged myself being full-time Cyber 60 for even a couple of years. But naturally, these things evolve, don't they? And Mark was getting a bit stressed out, so it was quite a risk for me, because I was leaving my career to help. But Mark's dad's Peter. I think you know Peter.
Yeah,
he is incredibly generous, and also he's just kind of this like safety net in terms of he had my back. So
right. So it was a great opportunity to
so financially
to do that.
It was a bit worrying, but
I'm sure
having my boyfriend's family support was quite nice. It was a bit daunting for my family. They were a bit like, oh, I'm not sure, you're not even married. That old chestnut. But so we did it, and I left my kind of 9 to 5, or definitely wasn't 9 to 5 at Plan.
No, they never are they, these jobs?
No, exactly. And I think what for me, a lot of people will say this because Cyber 60 is my business, but people say, oh, you give it your all and you work really hard because it's your business. But I'm just naturally like that. I just give everything. So what I felt like at Plan was I couldn't give my all to Cyber 60, but I couldn't give my all to Plan either. So I had to kind of make that decision of which way I go.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah. No, good for you. So what was the sort of startup trajectory of Cycle 360? Because it started around the back of Riley's, didn't it? It was a pop-up, wasn't it? Wasn't there a pop-up there? Were you involved in that stage of it?
Yeah, so that's exactly when I joined. Yeah. So October 2017 that was. And on reflection now, it was definitely worthwhile. But at the time, Mark and I were a bit at a stumbling block in that we didn't know if it was necessary to put all of our energy into this pop-up when we needed to focus on our bigger project. But the reason
the building, sorry to interrupt, the building was sort of becoming...
Yeah, so it
was coming to fruition, wasn't it, at that point?
Yeah, I think the reason we did it was because to set up the bike shop, to set all the systems, the operations, start talking to customers, start building a bit of brand awareness, but also B2B in that we needed to track bike brands. Because
of course,
we already have had bike shops on the Isle of Man. It was we were kind of coming in as this new
challenger.
Yeah. So it was quite important for us to build those relationships, and these things, they take a lot of time, and I think gaining that trust takes time. So that's why we did it. The bike shop essentially transferred from the pop-up to our main place, and then we could focus efforts on getting the cafe up and running, which was huge. Yeah.
So I'm curious, I mean, it must have been quite a task to get the brands that you've got, which are, the world leading brands, aren't they, up there? Especially Specialized is probably the biggest one, probably.
Yeah, Specialized and Cube. Yeah, exactly. Those are two biggest brands. So we kind of started off more kind of high end and niche, and we've kind of added to that portfolio. Again, it was just kind of trust and building that loyalty with the B2B side, which has just taken time.
Great. And so I'm curious about the actual decor of the place. I mean, it's red brick throughout, which is lovely. But for me, when I go in, having been to Colorado a lot to see family, it reminds me it's very much got a sort of a North American space vibe. And I'm just wondering, was that deliberate? How involved were you in that? Where did that influence come from?
Yeah, so prior to me meeting Mark, him and his dad, this was kind of a bit of a passion project, really, alongside them two, both of them working full time. They knew that it was needed on the Isle of Man, some sort of cafe bike shop. It was really becoming up and coming in London, especially where Mark was living, this cafe bike culture. So rather than just looking in London, they spent a lot of time in America doing research.
Okay.
So I know that Texas and mainly North America. I'm not doing my geography right now.
Yeah, it's a big state. I've never been to Texas.
A lot of places in America were formed part of that research phase.
Oh, good. Yeah.
And, things from, I always say to people, if you look at the detail within the building, even things like door handles and toilet rolls, and we have had a meeting about that. So if you see one thing like a door, we've had a meeting about that.
I'm sure. No, I'm sure. I like the way, No, I could join in. But and I have to say that your team in there, you have a really, from a customer point of view, it's a really nice team. You always get good service with a smile. If you're slightly gluten-free, you get people who to help get you what you want. So what sort of work have you done around developing the right team?
It's a good question. So I think for me, coming into Cyber 60 from the very beginning in terms of creating our brand and how we wanted to be perceived, when we built the company, I think it's really important that whenever someone does a startup, you always look at what your values are, because they are then that's kind of snowballs into the whole company.
Indeed.
So yeah, it was really important that we attracted talent, because we knew from the outset the Isle of Man's a very difficult place to recruit, especially in hospitality, because obviously we've not got a huge pool of people to choose from. So initially, we did actually think we were going to have to recruit across. But I think that's quite a good way of starting as well, because it means that you kind of go the extra mile to create your employer brand, thinking that you'll need to attract the absolute best, and then you end up creating a team that can be the best, just with good attitudes and hard work. Really, you don't have to kind of recruit the top end people, if you know I'm trying to say that in a
no, absolutely no
classic way.
No, I do.
Yes.
No, yeah, attitude's everything. If you've got people with the right attitude, then you can change the world.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the employer brand was really important, but also I think definitely from the beginning, Mark and myself have been really involved with that. So I think you'll know this from owning a company as well, that when you recruit people, you recruit their family as well.
You do.
You invest in them, and it's their life, isn't it? Their Monday to Friday. It's 5 days a week, and the rest, because people, if you recruit the right people, they will also give you their everything, and it means that they're even thinking about outside of work. So it was really important that we kind of brought everyone on that journey with me and Mark, and it wasn't mine and Mark's business, it was they're working for Cycle 360, and the journey that we want to all create together.
Good. Well, so far so good from my perspective anyhow.
It's definitely been challenging, and
I'm sure. I mean, you had COVID to get through. What was that like?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, COVID was really tough. Really
but
tough.
The bike shop did okay.
The bike shop did brilliantly, yes. And it has maintained a certain level now as well, which is good. But it's also meant that everywhere across the industry is good. So it's not necessary. It's quite difficult in terms of being above that, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was really important in COVID that the whole team felt like they were still part of the company, and we didn't. I'm trying to think of what the scheme was called now. Was it the furlough scheme?
Yes.
We still ended up actually all the profits that we made in the bike shop were all put towards our staff. I think that's really important that people know that as well, because we didn't do any PR or anything about it. Of course we didn't, but that's how we retained our staff after COVID as well. And
well done.
They did the most amazing thing when we reopened, and they all got together and threw a bit of a surprise for not just Mark and I, but the whole company, and the staff made a cake and they wrote a letter, and it was really nice. And it was just kind of that team and family.
That's lovely. That's really lovely. Yeah, well done.
But yeah, the challenging thing, I guess, with COVID, but from my perspective, I loved it because I just thrive on a bit of pressure. But yeah, it was difficult to just keep everyone really on that journey, despite the hospitality being closed. So yeah, now I'm waffling.
No, not at all. So Sacha, I mean, if you don't mind me asking, and I do primarily ask this in my day job as a financial planner, what's your earliest memories of money? I mean, what was money like for you growing up?
Yeah, that's a good question. Growing up in the Isle of Man for my first 3 years, my memories really obviously come down to what my parents have told me. Both sets of parents really have I've got this work ethic drilled into me that you have to work and be independent. So I've always had that drilled into me. Both parents work. So from my earliest memories, really, I've worked since I was 15. So it's always been really important that I pay for my phone bill, that I pay for my fuel for my car, that if I want to have what my parents used to say, beer money.
Yeah.
I've got to earn that. And I think that's so important and so key in growing up, because it just meant that even when I left university, I knew what that work meant. And I think everyone should work in hospitality at some point in their lives to understand how difficult it is working from the staff side.
Yeah, sure.
You're a kind of customer, definitely, in retail as well. So yeah, from 15, I worked in hospitality and retail. I worked all throughout uni as well. I had Saturday school when I was in A level, and I still worked on a Saturday afternoon and Sunday. So I've always been very, driven to be independent, really. It's always been really important for me, but always drilled into me.
Thanks for sharing that. And of all the things that you've done so far, what's given you the most fulfillment? You know, you can say from both a personal and a business perspective who you'd like. I've got a fairly good idea what the personal one is.
Yeah, well, personally, fulfillment is definitely my little boy.
Yeah.
So I became a mum 19 months ago. And yeah, gosh, that is just the most incredible, rewarding job in the entire world. And then professionally, my most fulfillment, I think this is what's so important, is to stop, pause and reflect, isn't it? And it's got to be building Cycle 360 from the ground up and looking back over the past 5 years of how that's grown. It's incredible, really. So yeah, it's probably how I feel most fulfilled, for sure.
I should think so. And for any aspiring, even existing business owner or entrepreneur, what would be your number one tip for success?
I don't think I have one. I think I have a couple.
Okay. Well,
so my first probably one would be always have a network of support and advice. Never feel like you're on your own. Just talk to people is so important. There's someone out there having been there and done it that you can learn from, and even just having a coffee with someone is it can be an absolute game changer, having a coffee with someone for half an hour.
Yes, it can.
So yeah, network, and have a network of support and advice. And then I've probably got three things, actually. My second one would be pause and reflect. Really, really important. Otherwise, you're just climbing this never-ending mountain and you never see the peak. If you pause, reflect and look down, look what you've achieved, I think then it's really rewarding to motivate you to go forward again. And then thirdly is always have a why. So I think what happens when you have a startup is you just grow and grow and grow, and people go like, why don't you do this? Why don't you do that? And you end up having this beast that you just keep throwing things at, and it's roaring and getting out of control. Whereas you just sometimes need to step back, pause and go, why are we doing this? To have kind of your kind of business objectives. But if I could go back 5 years, it would definitely be to have more of whys, because I know you end up just going, let's go, let's do. Having those objectives is really important, and that strategy. Yeah. Which is the hard bit sometimes to make the time for, but it saves time in the long run. So yeah.
That's really insightful. Thank you. And what do you do to relax and keep your life in balance? If you get a chance to relax, what do you do?
So balance has been more important than ever to me recently, since having my little boy Cass. So I've been doing a lot of reading to kind of keep me grounded, and doing a lot of things outside of work to keep me kind of growing professionally. But also for me, my endorphins are so important. So sport is just everything to me. I like to be competitive in sport, but fundamentally exercise is definitely my thing that keeps me sane. But also, the balance is trying to balance your family. So and within that is being the best mum I can be, being the best wife, and then growing professionally. So I'm doing the best I can as a marketer, and then lastly being competitive in sports. There's a lot of things that
so a few pressures there. Doesn't sound very relaxing in some way, but I know what you mean about the endorphins from sport. It's massively important. All right, thank you for sharing that. And what do you think are the best things about living in the Isle of Man, given that you've had a spell in the UK and come back?
Best thing about living in the Isle of Man is definitely the accessibility to everything in such a short space of time. So leaving work, I can be home in 5 minutes. I can get on my bike and be in a plantation all within an hour, which I just think is incredible. Definitely don't appreciate it enough. Well, I don't appreciate it enough. So there's definitely that side. I have built the most amazing network of people around me here, which I don't, and had been given opportunities like this podcast. I mean, I don't think I would have been given this opportunity in the UK of starting a business and being able to grow it as quickly as we have, and growing that network of people in such a short period of time as well. So I think the Isle of Man's really good for that.
Yes, it is. But sometimes I think opportunities are given to you, and what you do with them, that's the important part. And you've, power to your elbow, you've done that. Credit where due. But what would you say are the main challenges that the Isle of Man faces from your perspective?
Yeah, so sometimes I do lack a bit of inspiration in the Isle of Man. I find it really important. Mark and I both find it incredibly important for us to get off the Isle of Man. It can feel really claustrophobic and very samey, but I don't know if that's probably the same even if you live in the UK. So, you've got to get off, you've got to travel, you've got to see other things, see what other businesses are doing, not even in your industry, outside of your industry, and just keep that creative brain alive, really. I think that's really important. And yeah, I think for sport on the Isle of Man as well, I don't think there's enough opportunity for the same opportunities for female in sport as there is for males. Again, it's not just an Isle of Man issue and challenge, it's in the UK as well, but it's probably globally as well.
It starts with education, do you think? Sports, you can get out of sport really easy at school if you want to.
Kind of understanding where it's going wrong and what those barriers face. I mean, I held a women's cycling event, like a Q&A last year, and it was really interesting to hear kind of what the barriers are. And fundamentally, women will blame themselves as being their own barrier, but there's lots of factors that are out of our control, and even things like going back to us meeting in Breckenridge, Sharon, the fact that I didn't race that race when I should have been, and it was because I just recently become a mum and I couldn't literally balance it all. So yeah, there's lots of opportunities I think in the Isle of Man that not just charities and sporting associations can do, but local businesses as well. Education, and even in the corporate world of just making sure that exercise is prioritised in sport so that women can still be competitive even when they work. And
I bet there's showers at Cycle 360, aren't there? So you could ride your bike to work if you wanted.
Yes, there are. Definitely important, but it's hilly, isn't it? So
it's fine if you've got an e-bike, no problem.
Absolutely. Good.
So what have you got planned next, from in the business? What's going on? I saw some quite attractive looking brochures on the table the other day when I was in that had a sort of whole catalogue of things, which looked very nice.
Like any business, there's always opportunities going on. So we're in the business planning stages at the moment, which is probably a little bit later than the corporate world, but so we do want to grow. We are in a position to grow as well. So albeit that's expanding our footprint from the cafe side, we're really keen to do outside catering. We're also keen to sell our coffee. So the coffee that we have at Cycle 360 in the cafe is our own.
Right.
We're very, very passionate about. No one else in the whole world has our specific coffee, which is roasted locally on the Isle of Man. There's bigger goals like having a roastery, which is maybe years to come, but fundamentally in the next year we definitely have room and ideas for growth. So that's really cool in new markets, but also in our existing market of just expansion and footprint.
Yeah, I mean, I noticed you closed the fitness part of the business. What was the idea there?
Yeah, so COVID really changed a lot of things in the fitness industry for us. So obviously with the cafe, it is our cash cow. So with the fitness centre, it was kind of our loss leader. And we just felt it wasn't fundamental to our brand. When we were kind of looking at the bigger picture of where the company was going, it just really wasn't fitting into that picture.
Yeah.
So it was essentially us going, right, let's streamline, let's focus efforts. And it was a really tough decision, naturally, because we had an amazing team, very small team. But since we did close it, we have, on reflection, we didn't realise how much of a headache it was causing us, because now we can really focus on the positives and what's, highest revenue earners. And for the bike shop as well, there's lots of opportunities there for growth. So yeah, we've got lots of plans. For me personally, I've tried to step away from operations of the company. So going back to that balance of trying to do lots of and juggle lots of things. Do the best in my role. I'm trying to focus all my efforts on marketing, which is great because it means we can have a bit more of a strategy in place and focus on the business planning side and marketing.
Okay.
So and hopefully I'll be able to dabble into a bit of freelance as well, just to keep my marketing passion alive, because I do love helping others as well. Love it. If I could help 10 other companies, I would, but I just obviously don't have time.
I'm sure there's lots of best practice to share, and looking at what you've done there, I'm sure that's a great example to others. That's lovely, thank you. So you'd mentioned a book before, so what books have you read recently that you could mention?
So books. I read a recent one called Work Like a Woman. It's funny, I never really classed myself as a feminist, which is funny because feminist really just means equal, doesn't it? Rights. But I found since having Cass, I just needed to learn from other women that are mums and that are very driven by their careers and want to have it all. So I found myself just kind of going towards those kind of books.
It's really hard.
That's what I'm finding from all the books. I keep looking for it. But Work Like a Woman by Mary Portas is really good.
Okay, lovely. Great.
Also, there's another book called Rebel, which is about a young lady's journey to freedom as a Muslim. So she's from Saudi Arabia. And that really resonated with me from even living in Saudi Arabia, actually. So that's a really good as well.
Okay. All right. That's lovely. Thanks. We'll put those in the show notes. So who inspires you? Who's your main source of inspiration, would you say?
I've been asked this question before. I feel like there's not one celebrity that inspires me, but it's more just women in general that are like yourself. Definitely, you're an inspiration.
Oh, thanks. I think you are.
Who are doing
competing at cycling still. Hats off.
So who have goals, have aspirations, and don't let kind of societal factors get in the way of that. And also women that kind of empower other women and really inspire me. I don't think I have like specific names, but just everyday people, I think.
There's a good number in the Isle of Man, actually. Mickey Swindell was on a couple of weeks back. Angela Clucas, another nutritionist. There's loads. I mean, the podcasts that I've done with amazing businesswomen on the Isle of Man, present company included. So it's the future is bright, I think.
Definitely.
But it's hard work.
We've got an incredible network of women that are doing incredible things. So like you were saying before, asking before about what the Isle of Man can do to help. I think that International Women's Day is a really good opportunity to get that kind of press. Is really important for local businesses. We have to pay for that opportunity as a business, but people like Angela Lucas should be involved with that.
Okay. What's your favorite quote? Would it be the one that's on your LinkedIn profile by any chance?
Don't just talk about ideas, make ideas happen.
That's it. Yeah.
I'm definitely a doer, but I also like the quote of "Just be you." I think that's probably my favorite quote of all time. Just be you.
Yeah, I agree. So where can people go to learn more about you, the organization, the business? What would be the main? So I guess being a marketing expert, you're across all social media platforms anyway, but which is your go-to?
So cycle360.com is our main website, and it's very detailed on there as well. We've got a lovely bit about our history and our story, about being independent and kind of having those family roots. But we're across obviously Facebook, Instagram and LinkedIn as well. And who knows, maybe TikTok soon.
I won't hold my breath. That's lovely. It's been really enjoyable. Thank you so much, Sacha, for your time today. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Island Influencers is a fortnightly podcast. Make sure you don't miss the next episode by clicking the follow button on your podcast platform. A big thanks to the producer and editor of this episode, Catherine Watts and James Spooner at Bear Content. And thank you for listening.